Respected Matthewsachin, Chamachin, and your brothers and sisters in Christ. There's this one time back when I think I was in middle school, and I know it's hard for me to remember that far back. I'm not as old. It was some time back. So I'm trying to think back to middle school. I think it was middle school. And I remember growing up in Dallas in middle school, and there was this one kid that a lot of people, I don't know, for some reason, they didn't like him very much. And it's not like one of those situations where he's like a bully or anything, or like they have a reason not to like him. They just didn't like him very much. He was one of those kids that just seemed to be, picked on a lot. And for whatever reason, right? Everyone's different. Everyone is different who they are. This particular kid, I know, he grew up in the same area that I grew up. We actually lived in the same apartment complex, and so it wasn't a very nice area. When I grew up, we didn't have a very nice house or anything. It was very modest, and so the area, I knew that this kid specifically didn't exactly have the best hygiene. I don't even think he went to a dentist. He had some problem when he was much younger, like a baby or something, and they had to do some surgery on his throat, and so there was like a hole going into his trachea. But otherwise, other than that, other than the fact that he probably didn't have the best hygiene and he was a little socially awkward, there's nothing wrong with him. He was just a normal kid, just like all of us are, right? All of us at that age are just normal kids, and we're all different. We're all growing in different ways. But for some reason, the kids in that school didn't like him very much. And like I said, it's not his fault. It's just, who he is, right? He didn't do anything wrong. And so I'm new to this school, and I noticed this is going on. And I also know those kids from my apartment, that we lived in the same apartment. And something, you always have this voice that always speaks inside of you. And all of us have the same voice that speaks inside of us, that kind of guides us and kind of tells us. And some of us, as we get older, we kind of ignore that voice. For whatever reason. Maybe it's because our priorities change. Maybe we're afraid of being embarrassed or something. But this is still when I'm young enough to know that there's a point when young kids grow up, they reach a certain point and they really care how they look in front of other people. And that point when they reach there is different for kids. But the younger children don't really care. And that's a beautiful thing about young kids. They genuinely don't care what other people think of them. They just want to have a good time. They want to play. There's two little kids. They'll play with each other. They'll have a good time. They don't really care. They don't care what the other person looks like. They don't necessarily care if the other person smells bad. They don't care if the other person doesn't have all of his teeth. It doesn't matter. Two little kids will come together and they'll play. They'll have a good time, and they'll separate. Something happens when some of these children get a little older, their priorities change. And that voice that tells them that, hey, this person's okay to play with, this person, whatever, they kind of stop listening to that voice, and then they turn it into almost being like antagonistic. And they start turning against these people that seem to be different. These people that may not have the best hygiene, may not have grown up in a nice house, don't have all the nice new things. And somewhere along the way, these kids become, in a small way, bullies themselves. Not intentionally, probably, but they do. There is that small amount of bullying that happens. And so I remember, though, I was still young enough where I think I didn't care so much what other people thought of me. I needed a ride home one day, and so since this guy lived in my apartment complex, I decided to ask him to give me a ride home after school. And so that's what we did. And so I didn't care that other people were watching, that I got into his car, and then his mom drove us home. And then I even went to his house and we played G.I. Joes for a little because I liked G.I. Joes at the time. I still do now, but at the time I really liked G.I. Joes. But somewhere along the line, when we grow up, as we get older, that voice that tells us that it's okay to play with all the little kids that we see, regardless of what they look like, what they have or don't have, what they might smell or not smell like. Something happens and this switch gets turned on or turned off in our heads, I guess. And we start turning against people that we think aren't normal, or people that we don't think are cool. And we do this because we're also afraid of what other people might think when they look at us. This is so true among adolescents, but it's not like adults are immune to it. Specifically in our community. Our community has a really bad habit of hiding or not being open to itself or to others around them because they're afraid of what other people are going to say. I'm afraid of being honest with my neighbor, my friend, my brother, sometimes even my brother or my sister, because I'm afraid of being judged by them. So when I really genuinely need help, instead of asking for help, I'm just going to keep it to myself and just spiral down. Or my life starts to go out of control, or I start losing, maybe things become more difficult and things start spiraling out of control. But instead of asking for help, we tend to keep it all bottled up inside because we're afraid of being judged by other people. And I've seen it. I've been in situations where I know the truth of a situation, where I know what's going on in one particular family or a particular household. And when someone's visiting, like maybe a priest or a bishop from the outside is coming to visit them, when they ask, well, what's going on? How's everything? How's your family? Is there anybody here who's in need of healing? Or is there any difficulties you're going through? The number one thing we always say is, oh, everything's good, we're fine. And instead of actually saying, here, I do have some difficulties. I have this family member who has a problem. I have this person who's sick. I have this person who may or may not have some sort of an emotional problem. And instead of being open and honest with those people who can help, we tend to shut ourselves down because maybe for some reason we're embarrassed. And that's one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is, like I said, I was talking about even just our social interactions with each other. The people that we shun, the people that we ignore. Because we're afraid, I'm really good friends with this person. What are they going to think if I try and go talk to that person? And I've seen it, unfortunately, among our kids with bullying. That it's such a big deal that some of our kids, and I don't mean bullying as in people are getting picked on and beaten up. There's another kind of bullying. There's this bullying of indifference, a bullying of neglect. Whereas a group of kids want to play over here, and they leave this other kid over here off to the side. Or there might be a group of people standing and having a conversation in a circle, and everyone's having a conversation, but there's one person there who's not being involved. And the reason I bring this up is because, looking at the gospel reading for today. If we look at Joseph, his betrothed, his wife, was with child, conceived a child while they were still betrothed. And so he has every right, we've talked about this before, that he has every right, as in Jewish law. Again, we can't apply our 21st century morality to this story, but think about it. In their time, 2,000 years ago, Joseph has every right to do what with Mary if Mary was seen to have a child before they were married? What's his right as a Jewish, as a proper Jewish follower in those days? What is his right he can do?
Can divorce her.
He can divorce her. But if he divorces her and she's with child for that reason, that's the reason that he divorces her, there's even a greater consequence. What else is in his right to do?
Stoned to death.
You have her stoned to death. And he even said that, right? He's like, I'm just going to divorce her quietly and not really say anything because I don't want her to be put to death. So in his mind, he's still doing something that's just. And yet the angel comes to him and says, you know what? There's more to this than you realize. And he says, okay. And he's willing to kind of go along with this even more. He's not willing to put her aside. Because he knows that kind of together, there's something great about this person. There's something that's happening with this person that I don't even realize. And so he's willing to stay with her and care for her. And also care for the child that's going to come from her. In the epistle that was read here on this side, St. Peter was talking this idea about stones. That we're all kind of stones that are built together. A stone by itself is just a stone. It just kind of sits there. When you take a whole bunch of stones and you put them together in a nice, neat arrangement, stack them kind of high and kind of long, what does that kind of make? I don't know if you can imagine that. I don't know if that's a good description of that. Take a bunch of stones, put them together, kind of tall, kind of long. What does that make? A wall. There you go. Right? And then you take those 4 walls, well, you take one of those walls, you do that 4 times around, connecting all of them, and put something on top. You can get a house, you can get a building, you can get some structure that stands together. That when it comes together, a wall, a stone, just a stone by itself, just sitting in the middle of a field, isn't going to do anything. But a bunch of stones that are put together, sealed, stacked high, held together, that wall can be, repelling invaders from China. If you think about it, go tell Trump he wants to know how to build a wall. Think about how big the Great Wall of China is, right? What is the wall made of? Stone. It's a whole bunch of stones that cut across the entire country that can be seen from space, but it's held for so long. Because it's not one individual stone that's sitting there. It's a whole bunch of stones that are brought together and sealed, and they're stacked really high so that no one can break them apart. But when we start leaving these individual stones out, aside, and don't fill in the holes, and don't seal them together, don't stack them high, there's no strength there. The reason why stone walls, these old ancient buildings that still remain to this day, think about all those ancient wonders of the world that are still remaining to this day. The reason they do this is not because they're made of concrete. They weren't made with cement and plaster. What's holding them together is the stone. The fact that all the stones are put together. And St. Peter talks about this fact that we're all stones. That we need to be, but a stone by itself is kind of useless. A stone by itself is just there. But a bunch of stones that are brought together, hewn together, sealed, build a wall that no one can defeat. And that's this idea. There's some sort of inner strength, there's some redeeming quality for each and every single one of us. And it is our responsibility to look at each and every single one of our neighbors, our person sitting next to us, every other person who goes to the church, and find that redeeming quality about each and every single one of them, even if we personally don't think that we like them. But you find that redeeming quality because the most important thing you got to think about, someone else found something that was worth redeeming in each and every single one of us. Christ came into this world born to die for each and every single one of us. He looked at us and he said, there's something redeemable about that girl right there. There's something redeemable about that uncle right there. There's something redeemable about that auntie back over there. There's something redeemable about each and every single one of us that Christ is willing to die for us. So then it's up to us then to find something that we can redeem in each and every single person. So they're not these stones that are just cast aside. Stones that are sitting off by themselves. Rather, these are a bunch of stones that can come together, be built strong high, so that we as a group, as a church, as a family, that we're strong. And Joseph saw that. And Christ has proved that to us. Because even though we're a bunch of these little stones, the thing that seals us together is Christ. The thing that we all have in common is Christ. The thing that goes through all of us and binds us all together is Christ. And it's that Holy Trinity. And so I ask us, look at how the youngest of the kids act with each other. I know it's not little kids can't share toys, that's different, whatever. But they'll still play with each other. They'll still have a good time. And you'll notice that at some point they make a decision. I will play with this person, I will not play with that person. And when we get to that point, that's a very sad thing. Because as soon as that decision is made, as soon as that switch gets turned on, that stays well through adulthood. I will communicate with that person, I will not communicate with that person. I'll invite this person to my house, I will not invite that person to my house. I will talk about this person to their face, I will talk about that person behind their backs. And somewhere along the way, these seals that are supposed to bind us all together, they get broken apart and we become these individual stones that have no strength, that can't stand up to any kind of forces that battle against us, that can't stand up to any kind of hard trials, hard temptations, hard times. But when we look for those things that are redeemable with each of us, because like I said, Christ looked at us and said there's something redeemable about that person to the point that he's willing to die for each and every single one of us. And when we look at that and say, I want all of us to be like that big strong wall, then nothing can break us down. And I pray that we look at that. Let's look at one another during this season and every day after that. Let's look for that redeemable quality that brings us closer together and seals us in that bond. So we're this unshakable, unbreakable wall. All praise and thanksgiving to the Blessed Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, now and always and forever and ever. Amen.